of what happened in our continent done by our founding fathers for some time now, achievements attained or registered, indeed challenges ahead of us. This year, we celebrate the 59th African Liberation Day with the theme, Building Resilience and Inclusive African Food Systems, Taking Challenges of Nutrition and Climate Change. Over the last 59 years, our biggest part of the continent has faced challenges of food shortages, but together we have continuously made great achievements in food security and remained to commit the process to this end. Africa faces challenges in food security due to a number of reasons, including, but not limited to, climate change, insecurity such as terrorism, negative forces that destabilize Africa, among others. It is essential that the governments of Africa and indeed private sector reflect on the food security in our continent and take measures to address the same accordingly. This requires political will and mobilization of our brothers and sisters on the continent to collectively join the efforts to fight against causes of food security in our continent. In some African countries, particularly in Rwanda, the government has worked tirelessly with the development partners to support projects and programs to set innovative measures that address supply and demand-side interventions. Therefore, celebration of African Day should be an opportunity for us to remember our past as a continent and reform our committed future to achieving integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, and Africa that we deserve and Africa that we want. Ladies and gentlemen, the African Union has decided a proactive organization in finding solutions to African problems. And despite difficulties mentioned above, Africa has kept its drive to bring a brighter and self-sufficient future, which is mainly reflected in the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, in the African Continental Free Trade Area, which should open opportunities big for this continent and which we should seize. The future of big businesses will be played in emerging markets, especially in Africa, and indeed this will call for political stability and addressing conflicts, among others, that has beset Africa for some time now. This, of course, will also mean addressing and adopting principles of governance that are conducive for attracting businesses on the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate this day, we must also take stock of what happened during the COVID pandemic that has set the continent behind in terms of the economies and indeed, in particular, the food security. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, I wish to reiterate that the African Liberation Day is an opportunity for us to commit ourselves to support our government's interventions to build a better Africa. The capacity and the resilience of Africans give us confidence that together we can achieve our goals. With these few remarks, I wish you a happy Liberation Day and all the very best of this evening. Thank you for your attention.
Join us in thanking the Honorable Minister of State, our guest of honor. Once again, thank you very much. I have to note that this function is being live streamed both on YouTube and on Isango Star TV. The opening remarks have already introduced us into the discussion of today. I will simply mention a few statistics. Africa expenses on food imports in 2019 was 43 billion, projected to reach between 90 and 110 billion US dollars. Africa's total urban food market is projected to reach 150 billion by 2030, and smallholder farmers could capture as much as 30 billion of that total. The prevalence of stunting in Africa is at 30.7%, higher than the global average of 22%. About 256 million people in Africa were reported to remain hungry in 2018. Africa has 60% of global share of arable land. We have a great panel to help us understand this dilemma, and the moderator to help us dissect these issues and many more is Professor Alfred Bizoza. Professor Bizoza holds a PhD and is an associate professor in agriculture economics from the University of Rwanda. His research areas include agriculture economics, economic perspectives of land, climate change adaptation, institutions and gender perspectives from economic and land perspectives. He completed his PhD in June 2011 from Wageningen University in the Netherlands. He was a visiting scholar at Michigan State University in 2019 and at Cambridge University in 2017 during his postdoctorate research. He has published in several peer-reviewed journals and contributed to various policy and program drafting and reviews in Rwanda and elsewhere in Africa. He also served as a non-executive board member of the National Bank of Rwanda after the government's appointment during 2013 to 2018. Join me to welcome Professor Bizoza.
Thank you, Doctor. Honorable ambassadors and all protocol observed, without really forgetting to say Honorable the guest of honor, Professor Nshuti Manase. Thank you again to make this time to join everyone. All protocol observed. I'm given this chance to facilitate this session, which is basically tackling a very important subject. Very important subject. And again, very important subject. Why is it important? We talked about building resilience. We used to talk about having sufficient food. But now we are talking about how this food can be resilient. So we are going also to talk about food systems. Food system is a very complex concept entailing different aspects, including food security, climate change, and also other connected dimensions. We're also going to talk about climate change. This is also increasingly becoming an issue, not only for Africa, but also for other parts of the world. I'm not the one to tackle those aspects. I have people who are going to help us to address some of these questions that we are answering or we are thinking ourselves. We have with us, and I'm going to invite, first of all, online we are with Dr. Osman Badian. Is it possible to project and see his face, especially for those who are not familiar with him? While they are projecting, he is the founder and the executive chairperson and acting managing director of Academia 2063. He is also a distinguished fellow of the African Association of Agricultural Economists. He is also a recipient of the Africa Food Prize 2015 and member of the World Academy of the Science. He has over 30 years experience in academics, in research. He has served as the International Institute of Policy Research in Washington, D.C. He also served as a specialist in the agriculture sector at the World Bank. He managed also to contribute in mobilizing resources that were meant to support the development of Africa from 5 to 150 million US dollar. He made that contribution, and then we need to also acknowledge when he was at World Bank and also at the IFPRI. Dr. Badian received PhD in agricultural economics from the University of Kiel in Germany. He was also a recipient of a doctorate honoris causa from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. We can clap for him. Dr. Badian, are you with us? Yes, thank you very much. Welcome to the panel. Let me invite also Ambassador Christine Kunkinka. She is the CEO of Rwanda Cooperation Initiative. She is a Rwandan diplomat and civil servant. She is a former ambassador of Rwanda to Sweden, July 2015 till September 2021, and to Germany from 2009 and 2015. She studied at the Ludwigshafen University of Applied Sciences and earned a diploma in business administration. She speaks Germany. I think we are going to take this session in Germany, and also English, Kinyarwanda, and French. May I invite you, Ambassador, to come and join us and have a seat on my right side. Thank you. Thank you. So we have also with us Mr. Rwigamba Eric. He's the Director General of the Financial Sector Development for the Rwanda Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. In this capacity, he oversees all aspects linked to finances. So, and he, before coming to the Ministry of Finance, he also served as the head of the Rwanda Access to Finance Rwanda, and he has also held different executive positions, including those linked to the finance sector, audit, risk, and compliance. And he also worked in the commercial banks like EcoBank, but he has more also experience, especially in the area of agricultural finance. So, Mr. Eric, you can join us, and allow me also to welcome him and come and join us to this panel as well, as we clap for him. Great. Thank you very much. We're also going to have another person who is going to help us to discuss some of the core themes that are going to be highlighted here in the panel. We have Beatrice Chiza. She's the Director General, Environment and Climate Change at the Ministry of Environment in Rwanda. She does more work related to overseeing the development and dissemination of legal instruments, strategies, and programs related to environment protection. She also contributes on regulation aspect linked to climate change and pollution control. So she has occupied various positions more linked to the area of environmental audit. She also happened to also regulate aspect linked to academy and research under RICA. She's going to be with us as an expert in the area of environment and climate change after the discussion we are going to give her also a floor so that she can reflect on the discussion that are going to happen. So without taking much time, let me invite Badian. Can you hear the audience here? We are going to have a few minutes, 5 minutes, to give an overview on the subject that was allocated. And as we discuss, we are touching the aspect of how to build the resilience and inclusive African food systems as we tackle challenges of nutrition and climate change. So you have 3 to 5 minutes maximum. Give us your first overview on the subject matter. You're welcome.
I just left here 7 weeks ago, so it was hard for me to come back. But it's a pleasure and an honor to join you here today. To start, let me go back to some of the remarks that were made in the introduction. And I think those are also perhaps called for on a day when we're celebrating African Liberation Day. To go back and look a little bit what happened to African economies since independence to now, and I do it very quickly because I want to comment on where we go from here. You would look at Africa from the 60s to now. There are 3 major periods. There's the period of the 60s where Africa was doing extremely well. Nobody worried about Africa around the world. It was the following period of the 70s and the 80s that Africa had the most significant setbacks in terms of economic development. And that's understood because our founding fathers, like somebody said, were freedom fighters, liberators, idealists. They were not first and foremost managers and economic planners. But also at the time when Africa became independent, most of the development theory, the development economics, development science was just in gestation, wasn't really quite refined. We did not understand then how economies transition from being agrarian to being more industrialized. It took the entire decade of the 60s working on what happened in Asia for the professional economists to understand how this process works and how it should be managed. So our countries were ushered into independence at a time when we had new leadership and when the theory of economic growth wasn't quite solid, at least the transition from agrarian to industrial economies. So we didn't have the tools we needed to manage better and to run the economies better. The mistakes made in the 60s, some of those factors that have driven the stagnation of African economies in the 70s and 80s. And that's what I call the lost decades, where economies stagnated, population continued to grow, poverty increased, malnutrition increased, and the like. The third phase, starting with the mid-90s to now, have been 2 decades and plus of African economic renaissance. And it's important to understand what happened over the last 2 decades so we can build on that. I'll give you just a few figures. From the mid-90s to the late 2010s, African economies have grown, the GDP, the size has grown by almost 2/3, more than 63%. So in the same time period, malnutrition across Africa, depending on the indicator you use, has been reduced by 30 or 40%. During that period, African economies were among the fastest growing economies in the world. And the last indicator I measured before I get to your question, African agricultural productivity has grown faster over the last 20 years than agricultural productivity in any other region of the world. We started in good speed, we got stuck in the 70s and 80s, but we're in a place now where we are making a difference. And I'm saying that last comment about agricultural productivity to put into context the issue about African exports and imports and the balance there, and the fact that African markets are growing fast. If I'm not mistaken, those numbers came from studies made by my team in 2013 in one of our flagship reports. There is a difference between a situation where imports are increasing because agriculture is stagnating and a situation where imports are increasing while agriculture is still growing and growing faster. The difference is we have faster economic growth, a growing middle class, and therefore a faster growing demand than production. So there are two good signs in these large import numbers. We have had the capacity to get more food into our countries to feed more of our people beyond what we could produce, despite having the fastest growing productivity in the world. So that's a positive. Fewer people went to bed hungry. The second is that we have now that huge market in front of us to conquer. So if we do the right things by agriculture, we invest in productivity, increasing technologies, we create the markets, we embrace emerging technologies, we'll create the competitive edge we need to capture more and more of that market, right? Now, talking about, therefore, resilience and food systems, we are in the best positions to innovate and to compete, but the challenges are complex and are broad. I bring it down to one determinant, and I can go into the details because I know my 3 minutes are up or almost up. It is the governance of the economy. Having strategies that work, investing in capacitating the economy with infrastructure from roads to telecom to digital to electricity to water, opening up opportunities for the private sector. And countries that have done that in Africa have prospered and have made better. And I'll come to examples that are much more concrete. I know others are going to be talking about environment. One last comment here. To overcome vulnerability and build the resilience, we need to understand the underlying factor, the root causes, the nature and the patterns of chronic vulnerability. We turn our regards, our eyes to vulnerability in the times of shocks and crises. But they are rooted, deeply rooted chronic factors that drive vulnerability. Once you understand those, we can increase the absorption capacity of our vulnerable communities to face this off. But let me stop here, Mr. Moderator, and with more specific comments to questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much. Can you talk again a little bit, Dr. Badian, on what is missing? You talked about that we need to have electricity, we need to have water, we need to have also we have the market in front of us that we need to optimize. And we know that Africa is well known with also natural resources that are even sufficient for us to be able to capitalize on and deal with issues of food insecurity.
What is missing? Of course, it's not only one thing, there are several, but there are key critical things that I would put my fingers on. First is skills, upgrading, and development along the entire value chain. In order for us to build more wealth, we have to increase the productivity of the communities that are the most vulnerable. Those are the rural communities and those dependent on agriculture. That is the only way you can fight and win against hunger, against vulnerability, making people much more productive. If they're digging holes to make money, make them dig holes better and bigger and deeper in an hour, and you'll be able to earn more money. Coming back to agriculture, skills upgrading, skills development are among the most stringent constraints we have in developing our agricultural economies and food systems. To modernize agriculture, driving a tractor, for example, is not like driving a bicycle. Repairing a tractor is not repairing a bicycle, but also people live on the floors where products are being produced in the firms and enterprises. They need to understand the machinery. They need to understand quality control. People who are in charge of marketing need to understand how to read the dynamics of markets. People who are processing exports and imports need to know how to do this kind of thing. People in the packaging industry. Yet, It's barely noticeable in African countries where we have a critical mass of an institutional infrastructure to build, to upgrade, and to develop skills. We may have a project here and a project there. So the first thing, having a mainstreamed approach to skills development and skills upgrading. Farmers are the only ones who are already being trained. If we wait for somebody to go to college or to university to be a farmer, then we are not solving the issue of skills in our cultural sector. To solve that problem, we need to ask ourselves, if you had today a daughter or a son, 15 or 16, says, Dad or Mom, I want to be a farmer, where do you send that person to learn the trade? That is extremely important. Second, what we need to do, African food systems are transforming rapidly. Not just on the supply side, where the emerging processing sector is now the biggest value chain component, but also in terms of the demand, the growing African middle class. Somebody talked about $150 billion additional income or demand in the urban areas. That middle class wants to consume our staples. Yes, they may buy wine and caviar and cheese and other things, but they want to consume our white maize-based meals, our millet-based meals, the foreign cassava-based meals, but they want it processed. They want it better packaged. They want it rich, from the farmers to the processors to the traders to everybody else along the value chain. Thank you.
Thank you. While we still have you for this session, and there will be also more questions from the audience, it seems that we know what to do, and this can be observed in our strategies. We have our national strategies, we have regional strategies, we have African level strategies. So how to make these strategies work in 2 minutes, if you can be able to elaborate on that as well. Do you get my question? Can I repeat? Dr. Badian, did you follow what I asked as a follow-up question? Okay. Maybe we'll come back to that as we save time. We also give the opportunity to Mr. Eric. I think the aspect of financing agriculture is also critical and very important as we speak about resilience. So what is your perspective?
Thank you so much, moderator. The issue of finance, especially in an environment we want to create resilient and inclusive food systems, I think begs the first, question to say, how do we make agriculture as a sector a business? It ceases to be a substance activity. It ceases to be a last resort activity. It ceases to be something that people do because they have failed. And I think to understand that, I would want to go back to statistics and the opportunities that are available for everyone, especially at the continent, in terms of how much we import. I would want to go back to that. How much arable land we have, how much is agriculture important in terms of employment, food security, fighting poverty, export, all that. I think as we are all here, we know. But I think the question now, how do you deal with that? In my perspective, as you asked, I think for me, the first thing is to look at a sector that you want to de-risk. Let me start from that. How do we de-risk an agricultural sector in a way that all actors across the ecosystem are connected, integrated, and talking to each other? So let me break it down here. I think the first thing is to say, if we have, let me pick a good example of Rwanda, where people think we have very small pieces of land, and we have very small arable land. But I think the discussion of what I'm talking about in terms of de-risking and integrating the whole of the ecosystem is about identify those value chains where the country has competitive advantage, identify all what is needed to be in place for production to take place. So let me again break it down further. If it is livestock, can we identify which areas where livestock is being practiced? Can you measure the land? Can you map it out in terms, put it into a land management system where you can identify this land belongs to X? Can you link it to the national ID? Can you link that, and in terms of how many hectares that are good? Can we take another step to identify the types of the diseases historically these areas have been affected with, the quality of soil, the rain patterns and droughts? All that information is important. And most of our farmers, they don't have it, they don't know it. What they know, they have to pray, and then maybe it rains. The moment we get all that put into a digital, in a centralized platform, and make it accessible to local language, whichever language, I don't care. These people, they will understand that they have this information, and then support them with that information in terms of accessibility. Can we now put in place support system in terms of capacity building? Does this farmer know when to plant and harvest? And so the point I'm trying to make here, if we make that information available, support it with other agriculture infrastructure, the second component. The previous speaker talked about infrastructure. Can we have all programs that will help to make production possible in terms of irrigation, land consolidation, terracing, tree planting? Then we support them with the fertilizers. And then the same farmer I'm talking about, should we need some bit of better seeds? He can't research. The government and others should play a role to make available best seeds, best fertilizers, distribute them on time at the right price. With that, you think production is going to be possible. But they might need financing. Can you create financing mechanism that support farmers at the right time, not providing a loan when harvesting is over? I'm talking about at the planting side. Can we incorporate agriculture insurance? Why do we insure our cars and we can't insure our farmers and their produce? Can we incorporate credit guarantees so that they can access the credit? All that, what it does is support production, then post-harvest. We know more than 30% of produce is wasted through post-harvest handling. Can we put in place mechanism of how whatever is harvested is managed properly, and then link them to the market? Now, market and food distribution is very important. Now, what I'm trying to describe here is a scenario where we all work together, governments, development partners, private sector, to create a framework where what I call from the farm to the fork, from the farm to the market, all players along the value chain are connected and talking to each other. With that, we are going to solve the problem of food production, but also we solve the problem of food distribution. And food distribution now goes beyond the local boundaries. We have seen where there's a supply of food in one, let me start from the local context. One district has food without a market, and the other district has scarcity of food, and same country. When you take it to country, in one country, they are throwing away food, but in the other country, on the continent of Africa, they are starving. With this connectivity between regions, between countries, we are going to deal with the food flow across the continent. That looks at financing. We have heard, all of us here, that there's no financing for agriculture. The problem can only be addressed with what I described, because everyone is going to look at agriculture and this particular farmer in one lens. Let me quickly touch on what happens when you have prayed, but still it doesn't rain. What happens when you have prayed? Because most of our farmers, we have left them to pray. What if we still pray and the drought occurs and the floods occurs? I think, for me, what I've seen that we should be looking at as Africans is to start designing national disaster risk programs. Many of us, especially from the Ministry of Finance, you wait for the flood to occur. But when it occurs, responsible governments, those that are responsible, they run and start cutting budgets and here to fix the food, the shelter, the property destroyed, the plants that have been destroyed. Remember, we are coming to feed people who borrowed and used their incomes to buy seeds and fertilizers, which has been eroded away by the floods. So what we need to do is to save ourselves from the pressures of our reaction when floods, when hazards, when drought or hits, and put in place mechanisms that have been developed, tested, implemented across the globe apart from Africa. There are only 3 countries in Africa that has got national disaster financing program. Only 3. But the disaster is hitting all corners of our continent. Can we start developing national disaster risk programs that will be able to protect our vulnerable communities? By the way, when we are hit, the poor suffer more. They suffer more in terms of shelter, in terms of losses because of their assets, but also in terms of their lives. Can we save our governments and our people and put in place those programs that can predict and plan and forecast for those occurrences? Let me first stop there, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Let's give applause. These are very important insights you are giving, but there remains also some area to clarify and also to set the stage for discussion. You are talking about investing in irrigation so that we are able at least to deal with both the drought and heavy rains. But when you look at the cost of irrigation, which is around 8,000 to 12,000 US dollar per hectare, and when you look at the small scale farmers we have, are they going to be able to cope? And then the second aspect you are bringing in, the public-private partnerships, where the public or the government needs to take, because we see along the value chain, especially investment in irrigation infrastructure, not any ordinary farmer will be able to invest in that. Do you think that governments should also put more resources in that particular area? The third element, which still builds on that, looking at CADEP commitments, we had few countries achieving the 10% budget allocation, which was meant to promote agricultural transformation. Rwanda was among the few countries that achieved that target. So why the budget of agriculture, as we move over time, is also declining rather than increasing, as far as we have these challenges where we need to invest a lot in terms of irrigation? Over to you.
Thank you so much. I think that's a hard one. But I think it is hard in terms of what is the priority that we have. It hurts me when we all sit down here and start talk about how important agriculture is. I've been in different conferences, and when you look at the breakdown of the budget as you're talking about, it's a different story. So I think the first step is for us to recognize the fact that if this is important, let us walk the talk. And I think you are very right to say that the cost of irrigation and this, I think the PP model has demonstrated to be working. But I think for me, to answer your question, I will borrow an example from Rwanda. As the government of Rwanda, what the leadership has done is to develop 2 programs. Probably that would be a bit to break down the question. One, we have worked with the development partners in particular, in this case, I think I would mention World Bank, to develop a national program for commercializing and de-risking agriculture. It is a 300 million USD program to finance what I described. And a big chunk of it, almost 40%, is going to finance irrigation schemes as a public commodity. So we are aware of the fact that small farmers cannot afford these schemes. So what the government has done is to identify those areas that are viable for a particular value chain. So for example, maize, rice, Irish potato, horticulture, and then put farmers into groups, into what we call consolidation, land consolidation. Small farms, put them together, support them. Whatever I described up, all farmers in that particular group are supported. So this irrigation scheme in that particular area, serving a number of 1,000 farmers, then it is feasible. So that for us we think is going to work. Now, if that, in my opinion, can work in Rwanda with small farms, I think it can work in Nigeria, in Zambia, in Malawi, in Tanzania, where you have a bit of plenty of land. So I think, to answer your question, these programs can be done through PP models. The second program that we have done is the National Agriculture Insurance Scheme. Deliberately, within the limited resources, for us, in our case, agriculture is good for food security, is good for poverty reduction, export 30%, GDP contribution about 30%. So it's important. So the leadership has decided to say, we have developed a national agriculture program designed through a PP model, implemented through private insurance companies, and the government pays 40% of the premiums, 40% for crop and the livestock. It deliberately, 3 years, it is working. And so the question whether these models are affordable, yes, they are affordable if we all put together our efforts. Are they affordable for the poor person? No, but can we support them? Whatever I described requires research, requires to have the information, and requires a budget. By doing that, we have seen our young people, instead of moving to urban areas, they are now going back. We have left agriculture, which I didn't touch on, to the poor old Africans. The moment you make agriculture a business, the young people are going to go back and participate and partake in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we move to the next panelist, you talked about, and Badian also talked about the capacity building, especially in the agriculture sector. And then we need also to reflect on that. You also mentioned, who are the farmers are we talking about? What capacity do they have? And then I will bring an aspect which you can reflect on. What models can we use to capacitate this generation of farmers as we transition to a generation that is educated and also practicing agriculture, where we have now these new programs on youth and agriculture? What is your opinion on that?
Capacity building is one of the biggest, I think, elephants in the room, because we are talking about an activity that has been ignored for so long, and so there are attitude and perception issues that we need to deal with over time, and so it's a challenge. I will share still part of the examples I've seen working in Africa and in Rwanda. Let me start with those that are very common. In our case, and there's so many other countries that I've visited on the continent, you create clusters and cooperatives and groups. When you get a cooperative of 2,000 farmers, all engaged in tea farming, attaching 3, 4, 5 agronomists that understand this business, 5 agronomists trained, well paid. Now that's another important thing. attached to a cooperative of 2,000 farmers in tea is feasible. So training them, because they meet together, they work together, they harvest together, they dry together, and then they sell together and they share. Training them has been proven very easy. If you want to support every smallholder farmer with any technical support, you are kidding. It can't work. In terms of cost, in terms of getting the people that you need to do that. And that has worked in our case, especially in Rwanda, what I've seen, and quite a number of other countries. Group or cluster these farmers as per the value chain, but also as per the area. So coffee farmers, maize farmers, tea, and then in our case, for every sector, has got a number of trained agronomists that supports different farmers, different cooperatives of farmers. And that has been proven quite doable, because if you know you need a certain number of agronomists for different value chain, train them, pay them well, send them to other markets to learn, and training them and retaining them is a different thing. So that has worked, and technology also has been very important. Let me mention that. I've seen many countries now, especially with the fintech solutions, you see bulk messages on going out to farmers that rain is coming. Within 2 weeks, make sure you have prepared your land. Within 2 weeks, make sure you have started planting. And then there are animal diseases that are hitting our market. Do the following. So all that has been very helpful in terms of building capacities. But I believe for big commercial farmers, it is quite easier. It's part of the business, the cost of production. So I think it's more of a challenge where you have smallholder farmers scattered across the country, reaching out to them, supporting them when, and especially if the value chain is not working. Now let me emphasize this. Whatever you will do, when a farmer puts in all the little that he has or she has, especially mothers, and everything is eroded by either drought or floods, or you see a farmer who is crying with rotten potato that has not gotten a market. I've seen farmers pouring milk, yet he needs school fees. You are not going to tell that farmer to participate in that activity next season. And all the younger will migrate to urban centers. So whatever we're going to discuss, if we don't connect the dots along the value chain and make it a business that makes money, and a business that he feels he can earn a living, probably we shall remain with a long way to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Join me to give applause to your inputs. I think we will still have a session to. Let me also ask Ambassador. I think regional cooperation between states, between the region, continental cooperation is very key. We cannot do it in an isolation way. So what is your take, and what is the advice you can give the audience?
Thank you, moderator. I think for the one who don't know Rwanda Cooperation, as the name says, we are we are in charge of cooperation, and we do it in knowledge exchange. What we see and hope that it will become the third pillar of international cooperation, alongside financial cooperation and technical cooperation. So I think in this context, as we gather here, it's important that we share experiences, that we share knowledge. We at Rwanda Cooperation have two kind of knowledge, or two kind of products we offer. On the one hand, we have what we call the homegrown initiatives, and on the other hand, the good practices. And when we talk about homegrown initiatives, we look at the solutions we have in our culture, in our different and respective culture. Particularly now in Rwanda, I can give the example of Girinka, the one cow per poor family program that addresses the topic we are discussing today. It is a program that is inspired by the Rwandan traditional practice of giving a cow as a sign of friendship or appreciation. And since 2007, vulnerable families have been given cows, which have contributed to reducing stunting and malnutrition, but also giving to the families an additional source of income, as they could or still can sell excess milk on the market, or even use the manure to improve the output of their own crop fields. So as of 2020, if I can give maybe some figures, so milk production increased by more than 110%. The percentage of stunted children fell also from 51% to 33% in 2020, from in a span of 10 to 15 years. Food insecurity was also reduced from 28% in 2006 to 19% in 2018. But most notably, more than 380,000 families that received a cow through this Girinka program were contributed to lifting more than 1.2 million Rwandans from the extreme poverty. So this is an example of one of the solutions that are rooted in our traditions, but addressing issues that we are facing today and particularly discussing today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's give applause. And you say about homegrown initiatives, but also we know that Africa is rich in different approaches or homegrown initiatives, and also, but we know that there are also some area of cooperation that countries are trying to build. We have different initiatives like the Africa Free Trade Area. How do you think that Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, the entire African countries can benefit from these initiatives, as far as linking farmers to the market is also important?
That's a huge topic, but from our side now, as Rwanda Corporation, we share our homegrown solutions, and as I said, as the good practices we have in Rwanda, with different delegations coming from mostly now from Africa. And maybe I can take the opportunity to acknowledge here the delegations we have currently from Sao Tome and Principe. It has been said, Malawi, Cameroon. We also have a delegation from Senegal, but they are outside Kigali now, and they come for different topics in the agriculture sector, of course, but also in many other sectors like gender, youth, women empowerment, and many other sectors. And I see that as a good example where we work together as Africans, where we learn from each other and address also issues and good practices like the one also mentioned by Dr. Eric, that other African countries can learn from our experiences and connect and again link. I think with the African Free Trade Area, it will give all African countries the opportunities to trade with each other, which will make it much easier to address the issues we are discussing today of resilient and inclusive food systems, but also tackling issues like climate change. For example, from Chad, we also have a delegation that came to learn from our environmental policies to help them tackling issues of climate change, remembering that the issues they are facing today might be our issues in a few years if we don't act together, and if we don't act fast. So it's of utmost importance that we learn from each other and work together as Africans to address the issues that we are discussing today, but also other issues that are pertinent to our continent.
Thank you very much. Do you think this kind of exchange programs, if strengthened even in other countries, like we going to Ghana, going to Benin, going to Cameroon, rather than only receiving, do you think this also may add value in terms of knowledge sharing, experience sharing, and also capitalize on that to develop our countries?
Absolutely. In cooperation, we see it also, and knowledge exchange goes both ways, that we learn from each other. But most importantly, what we also have noticed is that the solutions we have on our continent, if we go to learn from Malawi, for example, our contexts are similar, our cultures are similar. We are more likely to develop policies together that are more sustainable, that are easier implementable than when we go to Germany, for example, to learn from them. So to learn from each other on the continent is important and have some added value that I have mentioned, but it also helps us to develop this sense of togetherness and Pan-Africanism that
of
we
being
need.
an African.
Absolutely. This sense of we need to walk the talk, but jointly, as we know, if one problem affects Rwanda, most likely the neighboring countries will be affected, or even beyond. So we definitely have to work together and strengthen this spirit of Pan-Africanism. And it's so important that we have so many nationalities represented here today on this special day.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Before we go to the audience and give them time to also give some questions and comments, allow me to invite DG Beatrice. We are talking about climate change. We are talking about environment. And these are very critical aspects as far as food production is concerned. Where do we stand as Africa? Maybe someone can help to give a microphone. Yes, she's there. Great. Yeah, give us your reflection, please.
Thank you. Thank you, moderator. Honorable Ministers, I think when we talk about climate change, it's a cross-cutting topic. When we talk about climate change, we talk about agriculture, we talk about infrastructure, we talk about water, we talk about forests. It's a broad topic. But most importantly today, we're talking about food loss. We are talking about food production. We are talking about ending hunger. And in our perspective, in the environment sector, you just asked, what are we doing? Yes, we have, globally, we have the SDGs. We are all into the SDGs. On top of that, we have the Africa Agenda 2063. And then most importantly, we customize it in the country level. We have the Vision 2050. And as the Excellency said it, Ambassador said that Rwanda aspires to become a carbon neutral from now to 2050. And what does that mean to us in the sector? We are going in the pathway of being carbon neutral. And if we want to be carbon neutral, it means we have strategies to go to those, to the pathways of carbon neutral, to live a carbon neutral lifestyle. And most importantly, in agriculture, now we have different strategies in environment that tackle the agriculture, the production issues. So we have the cooling strategy. That's an example that we can give, which is the strategy that tells us about how do we tackle the issue of food loss, issue of food waste. As Eric rightly stated it, he said that most of the farmers, they lose their production due to the, post-harvest handling. how do we tackle that problem? Only by setting in place cold chains so that the whole value chain from farm to transportation to the market until to our food, to our tables, we need a system that secures all that transport. So the cold chain could be one which will tackle the problem of food loss. But not only food loss, but I'm also seeing the nutrition part of it. Because if Africans are losing 30 to 50% of their production, I think we are now losing the nutrition food, which causes the malnutrition. We are losing the cash, as he said. We are losing the money that they would have used otherwise. So tackling the food loss problem in the environmental sector, it's multifaceted. It means we tackle the malnutrition issue, but also, most importantly, the climate change issue. Did you know that when we lose the food waste and we just put it into our landfills, we pile them in the landfill. And once in the landfill, they do provide some greenhouse gases, which cause the effects of climate change. And then the effects of the climate change cause floods. The floods that comes to the same chambers of our people and then destroy them and then cause them to also go to the, insurance if they do. And if they don't, what do? They stay vulnerable. So those are the strategies we need. And to walk the talk, as they said, in Rwanda we went even further. Now we have set the Africa Center of Cooling and Cold Chain. That's a very good example for, coming from strategies, plans, and to real actions. Those are the good examples of how we can put what we think as strategies, as plans into actions. That center is in Rwanda, but it's an African center. And we are happy to host it in Kigali, but serving the African nations. And that center will help us to work with policymakers, academia, farmers, sellers, bring all of them together so that we see all the value chain. We will have training centers where we train smallholder farmers, where we train technicians who will be operating the cooling machines and all those things, but using also the green energy. So you see, we are tackling different issues at one center. And this is a good example of how African nations, we can stand together and walk the talk. So this is what we are doing in the Ministry of Environment and in the environment sector in Rwanda. But most importantly, we now have the nationally determined contributions. This is our, do I call it our plan that is leading now our climate agenda in Rwanda. And it is ambitious. It has 11 billion, but 5.3 of that goes to the adaptation. What do we mean by adaptation? Building resilience of our local communities. So by building resilience in agriculture again, we mean building the smart agriculture, the climate resilient crops, producing climate resilient crops, knowing that this crop cannot be resilient, let's change, go to this. So there is a lot of research behind that, but we need the strength and the efforts of all of us to reach to the ambition we are setting. And we need to set ambitions as African, because if we don't set ambitions, no one will do it for us. And as he said, we need to look back and see what is our priority. Once we know what is our priority, we need to go back to our ministries, especially the finance part, and see when we are planning, when we are budgeting, how much are we injecting into agriculture, and most importantly, how much are we injecting into making agriculture more resilient and more resilient to the effects of the climate change. So I think that's one thing we need to tackle. Let me end by wishing that we go back and learn from the nature. As I'm coming from the environment background, You know two birds, the owl and an eagle. You all know them, right? So the owl doesn't see when it's light like this, but when it's dark it sees. Igihunyira, turachizi. So African, we need to be like an owl in one part and like an eagle in another way. An eagle is staying up there and having this broader view of everything. So when I say we need to be like owl, is when we are setting strategies, when the world is setting the ambition, when everyone is saying this is the way to go, this is the way to go, African, we need to step back like the owl and say, we're not seeing, give us time. We need to concentrate, and then when night comes, we will see. We just see clearly and see, this is the strategy they were talking about, this is what they were talking about. And then we now act like eagles. Stand up there when you have a broader vision. Instead of implementing something and having the development, the piecemeal development, stand up there and look on a broader perspective, see what's our priority, and go to actions. And the eagle acts quickly, rapidly, and then to the point. So that's how Africa we need to act, and especially when it comes in the tackling the climate change and the food, especially. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it again. Thank you. Thank you very much, Beatrice. Can we give the floor to 2 or 3 people who have like any? We have one who has expressed, because he's a man, I can saw another man, but we need also another woman. Can we get a lady who is also willing to give an opinion on this? I don't want to have only men. I have to be gender sensitive. So we have our colleague, they will give the microphone. And then we have, yes. Maybe you can tell us your name again and the organization we are representing. And then we give you like 1 minute to express, and then we share the time. He's standing there. So then we have another hand. Yes. I'm still expecting to see another hand, but which is a hand from a woman or a lady. Okay. In that case, I will withhold my position. Okay?
Thank you so much, moderator, for giving me this chance. My name is Joseph Nagoli. I'm coming from Malawi, especially for the National Planning Commission. It was very interesting to hear the panelists expanding what we are talking about here. And I think, to me, it actually confirms that we have the solutions. But as the other said, maybe it's the implementation that is lacking. But I wanted to come to the theme of today, which is about building resilient and inclusive African food systems. I think we cannot build a resilient food system if we don't Africanize our food. And I think I was basically reminded of the current disaster, which is happening thousands and thousands of miles away from Africa. And that's the Russia-Ukraine war, which is affecting us. And I think that situation has exposed 2 issues. And number one is what our colleague said in terms of connecting the dots of the food system. And I'm reminded of, yes, we have been able to actually finance agriculture. But I think within agriculture, I think we are failing one thing, that's financing research and innovations. If we cannot do that, we cannot innovate, we cannot be competitive with other issues. And I'm saying, I think something that wheat is affecting us, but yet we have very, very nutritious crops locally. We have nutritious systems that we can develop as Africans, but we are lacking the innovations, the research that actually we can upgrade those value chains within our own context. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I didn't talk about research because I'm also from that particular sector. They would say that I'm claiming to have money to come to the sector of research, but we have to invest in research. We need money to invest in research so that we have innovation, the technologies we need. all the best practices we know in the greenhouses, how do we take them to the farmers? That's the participatory action research that requires a lot of resources. So as we think about funding or financing agriculture, we need also to think about research. Yes. Give you the floor. Tell us your name again and the organization you are representing. And since I didn't see any hand from a woman or a lady, I will talk to Dr. Chantal from the Ministry of Agriculture to have like also 1 minute, because we are talking about agriculture. And I know she's also with us. She can also have 1 minute and reflect on this as we close the session. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Express Moyo from Malawi. And I am a consultant, but I came here accompanying our minister for some engagements. Doc, you articulated very well about the program, national program for commercializing and de-risking agriculture in Rwanda, and with all the grouping of farmers, smallholder farmers, and so on. And also you said that it's a very sensitive group. If something goes wrong, then you find next year they will not do a good job. Now, we face a certain problem in Malawi regarding the markets. And when you produce, probably you can't consume everything. You need to take some to the market. But we find that the markets are not well defined. Usually it's these small buyers who come, and then they give very small, very low prices that at the end of the day, it really affects production of the following year. Could you just probably briefly articulate marketing measures which Rwanda is practicing so that we can learn from it? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe you can respond to that question immediately. This is Eric.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Moyo. I think that's a very relevant question. When I described the value chain development, integrated and linked, market was one of them. And as we said, if you don't group the farmers to produce reasonable quantities and qualities, then the market will reject them. If you develop the farmers, they produce, but they have no access to roads, power, water, storage facilities, drying facilities, still you will not be able to link them and their produce to the market. If you don't develop the standards in accordance with the market, then you don't get the two talking to each other. So in our case, we are still struggling with what you described in Malawi. We have made an attempt, and we hope that's going to address the issues. So what the examples I'm going to spell out, are not to say that they are perfect, but they are working, and it's work in progress. I think what the leadership of the country has done is to say this particular district produces good milk, and for livelihood of farmers, they depend on their cows. For that to happen and the milk becomes valuable, they have created through a private sector vehicle a milk processing factory or plant. So whatever is produced, there is already a market to produce to buy it, in addition to other individual buyers. That can be improved, but it's working. And it is, the plant does produce and process and add value to milk, but now there's a plan to expand it to do powdered milk and other product. That, in my opinion, is a sense of what should be working for different value chain. The second example is a cassava plant. We know there are areas in our country where cassava is produced in good numbers, in good volumes. We have set up a private vehicle that produces cassava into cassava flour, one of the best, starch and other products. We think those two, if they talk to each other, they're going to be very massive in terms of improving and creating opportunities. The third one is soya. The same thing. We identify areas producing soya. By the way, we are not getting enough soya. And through a private and the PP program, there's a soya plant that produces so many products. The same thing with maize. So what, in essence, would be a solution to all African farmers is where stakeholders are working together, create a mechanism where there is production of good quantity and the volume and the qualities, but also create a market intentionally. Beyond our boundaries, we should be able to now sell some of our products. Like the one I mentioned, we are targeting the market in neighboring countries. So that directly affects and supports the farmer downwards. So downwards, if you do that, we hope that that will be able to solve the problem. Now, with these other frameworks of African Free Trade Area, now that becomes massive. Time is going to come when this is working, but there's no product. And that would be sad, that you are in a country in Malawi, but there's nothing for you to sell to Africans. I think as we work towards that, we should be preparing also our farmers and our private sector to be able to tap into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Chantal, she's a DG planning in the Ministry of Agriculture. Can you give us your insight, 1 or 2 minutes, what do you think on this debate as we close?
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. May I come?
Come on.
Maybe
Yes,
there.
please. Yeah.
Sorry. Hello, good evening. My name is Chantal Ingabire, Honorable Guest of Honor, Honorable Ambassadors, distinguished guests. It's a great honor to me representing the Minister of Agriculture on behalf of our Honorable Minister who can't join us today, unfortunately, due to other urgent duty. I don't really think I have to say a lot because after such brilliant discussion and the rich interventions of the participants, I think for the Minister of Agriculture, we are really satisfied. But what I want to maybe highlight is that Africa as a continent and Rwanda as a country, we have clear strategies on how we should improve our food system in general and how we should increase our farmers' resilience. At Minagri, we are strongly convinced that we can achieve food security, and that once we put all our efforts together. On our side, we are still committed to contribute. Maybe I can give only few action points on which the ministry is delivering and on which we'll continue to deliver. One is increasing area under irrigation, and that's very important for our country, and that's being done already, and we continue to support our farmer to make sure we don't continue to depend on rain-fed system. Second is to promote environmental friendly and soil management good practices, and this mainly through using organic fertilizer, and of course promoting development of terraces. And we are now looking at the progress we have. We are having very good results so far. Third is that we continue to promote the engagement of youth, engagement of women, participation of the private sector in our food system. This to make sure everyone is really involved, is benefiting from the Rwandan envisioned agriculture transformation, because as they have mentioned, the panelists, but also as I guess everyone knows in this room, the country has embarked in a journey of transforming our sector, agriculture sector, from the largely subsistence farming to market-oriented agriculture. So we have to make sure everyone is really engaged, mainly the private sector, youth and women, so that no one is left behind. Fourth, we are committed to continue to invest in appropriate infrastructure. I'm happy some of our panelists talked about post-harvest infrastructure, post-harvest losses, and I want to highlight here that the government through Minagri is really committed to reduce the losses, and we are recording good progress in that way. Fifth is the risking agriculture. I don't really want to give more detail because my colleague Eric from Minecofin has already given a lot. And last but not least, we know that coordination of different stakeholders, actors at various levels of agri-food system will need to be strengthened. And this to make sure we put more effort in focused interventions, and so that we get better results, but also and mainly to make sure our different actors in the food system access to markets and also to service. Honorables here present, allow me to close by wishing you a happy Liberation Day, but also highlighting that together we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chantal. So, Badiana is still with us. Just a few seconds to say your last insight or opinion on this.
You have heard from Mr. Gatera and the DG Components of Environment. What it takes is good planning and good execution. There's really no secret. The example of the owls and the eagle, they are looking for a value chain, its needs, all the things are the quality of planning. So having good data to understand these different issues, working with the local expertise that you have in mobilizing them to provide the right analytics, to understand the complexities, not just of the value chains, but of the rural economy, agriculture, and the broad agriculture in general, and having a long-term outlook, knowing that nothing is given to us, everything has to be fought for. Also knowing that we're just talking about African liberation, sovereignty is to do what we must, not what we wish to do or what we like to do. So there are conditions out there we have to confront and compete. Our markets are everybody's markets. The global markets are also our markets. What's going to make us survive and win is to compete, and for that we have to recognize the realities on the ground and build and empower our agricultural sectors and value chain. And that's possible. You look at the last 20 years, Africa has made strong strides. And the best performing countries are those with the commitment to good planning, to good execution, to tracking performance, to assessing impact, to asking for results from the different ministries and agencies and special institutions. You do that, you get results. The rest is actually easy. You can buy the technology if you have good planning. You can get the financing work if you get good planning. We heard here from Mr. Gatera the examples of how they're tackling marketing issues. They plan for it, they could get those vehicles. So it is how you plan, how you execute, and continuity in what you do, and consistency in what you do, not jumping from one place to another. What's good about us in Africa right now is that CADEP has created a comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, the Malabo Agenda, have created a solid and stable framework. For those who have not been in this area longer enough, the last 20 years are the only 2 decades where Africa wasn't being pulled in all different sectors. Today is demographics. The next day is environment. A day after that, it is nutrition. A day after, it's something else. So we're being pushed and shoved and sidewise like a ping pong ball. We could not focus in terms of strategy. We're following a global agenda. I think the DG from MOE said that let's take stock, let's take time and understand what's happening. That is now the mode of operation in Africa, and the Malabo agenda made it possible, and Agenda 2060 in much more broader term. But it really comes down to good planning, good execution, having strategic orientation, being continuous in terms of efforts and consistent. The rest falls in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We thank you. Yeah, dear guest of honor, dear protocol observes, let me summarize this session very quickly, and I don't even intend to say everything that has been said. I think these are very critical aspects that came out. My take home is that we need to have enough food, not only in terms of quantity but also quality, because when you talk about nutrition, it's also an aspect of quality food, or the diet that we also consider, or our basket of consumption. The second aspect I think we need to also to reflect further is the investment in infrastructure that are needed to support agriculture development, but also to support all programs linked to how to sustain the system so that it can become resilient. The other aspect we need to take as a message is also to leverage on homegrown solution. I may even add home resources. We have resources in Africa, but the optimum use, efficient use of those resources is very critical. And we are looking at a solution within Africa, not outside of Africa. The other aspect that came as critical as well is capacity building. And when we talk about capacity building, just reflect our farmers. Who are the farmers we are talking about? What capacity do they have? Assume if everyone in this room decide to go to the farming activity, what change are we going to see? So if we cannot go there, let's send the money that we have in our programming and in our budget so that it can support farmers to also in terms of capacity building. There is another aspect, dear guest of honor, which is the role of governance and institutions. As an economist, I think we do not capture well the impact of leadership, the impact of governance to the national development. An example is Rwanda. We really attribute most of the aspect we see as governance and leadership. It's very critical. Issue of corruption, how do we address those issues? The budget that's supposed to be allocated in those programs, is 100% go to those programs, or there are still issues of institutions to be addressed? So institutions, both soft and hard, are very critical to make this journey possible. And then the other aspect that was talked also is the working with partners, effective engagement of partners. So any country in Africa cannot work without having partners. But the question is, how do you engage them? How are you bringing on board all the development partners into supporting the national priorities, national programs? In the 60s, you could see programs coming to reflect other programs of other countries. But we need programs that reflect, that are site and context specific for Africa, that will come to help us and address the issues towards the journey of liberation of Africa in terms of economy and food security. Financing is very critical. Where is the private sector, and what makes the private sector resilient or resistant to invest in the agriculture? The interest rates are still very high, 18, 15, 20%. and a farmer has to pay immediately 1 month after taking the loan, and the farmer has to harvest after 3 months, why not adapt these financial products to the context of farmers? I think these are the area we need also to give another reflection. So without further ado, and I will give again back the microphone to the overall moderator, but allow me and join me to applause for all the panelists and their contribution to this session of the day. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Yes. Thank you again. Yeah, Baidan, thank you for your time as well. This is the second time to see you online, but I want to see you physically in Rwanda. When are you coming? Okay, it's a question you can answer later. But I know you have your office here. Thank you.
Thank you so very, very much. Dr. Badiane, Ambassador Ngurichinga, Mr. Eric Rwigamba, and of course our moderator, Professor Bizoza. So give them a second. So we've come to the end of this session, but before we leave this room, I would like to invite a few individuals for a photo session as we move to the cocktail area. I will invite the guest of honor, ministers here present from friendly countries, Chairperson, Pan-African Movement, the Dean of African Ambassadors and all ambassadors and chargé d'affaires present, CEO, Rwanda Cooperative Initiative, DJ Africa at Minafet, the mayor of the city of Kigali, if he's still present, the representative of the Ministry of Defense, Major General the Major General retired Ambassador Frank Mugambaje, if still present, the Acting Reserve Force Chief of Staff, the representative of Rwanda Police Force present. And I want to recognize the message of congratulations from Cuba. So those I've read, if they may come forward for a group photo as we prepare to go for the cocktail. The protocol will guide us. Thank you.